Seches Megillah Daf Yud Aleph is a very long daf, continuing the Gemara's discussion of the Megillah Esther. The first part of the daf will be the introductory drushos that were said by a number of Amirayim. The Gemara will then get into some of the actual psukim, the first one or two, and describe them word by word, saying drushos along the way. In the end, the Gemara will analyze the numerical calculations of the 70 years that the exile of Vavel was meant to last and how it's supposed to be calculated, and that's a calculation that will take us into the next stop. So the Gemara is in the middle of listing how the various Amoraim introduced their discussions of their shir on the Megillah Esther. So we're up to Reb Chanina bar Papa, who began with a pasuk in Tehillim. Hirkafta enosh l'rishenu banu ve'eshiv amayim. You put a mortal person over our heads. We went into fire and water. What does it mean we went into fire and water? Fire is in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, like Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah went into the furnace. And water is in the days of Paroi, like he threw the children into the river. Now the end of the pasuk says, "V'tayseinu l'rvaya," but you took us out into generosity. That's in the days of Haman, where we were taken out and saved. Now, Rav Yochanan introduced Megillah Esther with the following: Zachar chasiv emunas leveis Yisrael ro'al chal avsi aretz eis Yeshua se'elikenu. He recalled his kindness and his faithful promise to Beis Yisrael, to Klal Yisrael. All the ends of the earth have seen how Hashem saved us. So when did all the ends of the earth see how Hashem saved us? That's in the days of Esther, when the letters discussing the victory of Klal Yisrael were sent around to the entire world. Now Rish Lakish began with another pasuk in Mishlei. Ari Nayim v'Dayv Shokek Moishel Rasha Al Am Del. A roaring lion and a growling bear. That's a wicked king over a poor nation. So the roaring lion is Nebuchadnezzar, who's called the lion, like it says, Ola Aryeh Misuvchoi. That's in Yirmiyahu. The bear refers to Achashverosh, who is called a bear in Daniel's discussion of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Like it says, Cheva Ochari Tinyana Damyo L'Dayv was another animal, looked like a bear. Now, the bear also refers to Achashverosh for other reasons, because Rav Yosef explains the Persians, who Achashverosh was king of, eat and drink like a bear, they're fat like a bear, they're hairy like a bear, and they never sleep properly, just like a bear. Now, Umoshel Russia, a wicked king, that's Haman. A wicked ruler, that is. He wasn't a king, that's Haman. Al-Am Del, over a poor nation, that's Klal Yisrael, who were poor and did not have enough mitzvahs to their name. Now, Rav Elazar introduced Megillah Esther the following: through laziness, the ceiling collapses, and through leaving the hands empty, the house starts to leak. A pasuk in Koheles. So he explained as follows: through laziness, yimach means becomes poor, like the Torah says, if somebody's too poor to pay. And Hamakara refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like it says, Hamakara b'mayim al Yosef, the one who roofs the upper worlds with water. So, through laziness, as it were, HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes poor, meaning through our laziness to do a mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, as it were, unable to save us, because we don't have the proper zechusim. Of course, you can't say that he was unable. Hashem is not unable to do anything, and therefore we use the phrase here, Sayin of Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sayin of Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to refer to him. Now, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak introduced the Megillah with a pasuk in the Tehillim, Shir Malis, Luli Hashem Shahaya Lanu Yemer Yisrael. If Hashem wouldn't be with us, then Klal Yisrael should say so. Luli Hashem Shahaya Lanu B'kum Aleinu Adam. If Hashem wouldn't be with us when a man rose up against us, this is first to Haman. It was really the only time in our history that we were attacked and almost destroyed by a man who was not a king. And Farshim say that a king is not so bad because he has to worry about keeping his kingship. Any man can just destroy everything. He doesn't care about being king over anything. Now, Rava introduced Megillah Esther with the following pasuk: B'ros tzadikim yismach ha'am, u'b'mashal rasha ye'onach ha'am. When the tzadikim are exalted, the people are happy, but when the Rishaim rule, the people are sighing, they're groaning. So what does it mean? When the tzaddikim are exalted, the people are happy. That's when Mordechai and Esther ruled, like it says, the city of Shushan was happy. However, that's when Haman ruled, like it says, the city of Shushan was confused. Rav Masna introduces with the following: Kimi goygadol asher lo yelakim karivim elav. Who is a nation that is so great that has a Kadosh Baruch Hu close to it? Now, the Gemara does not explain this drasha, but it sounds like that HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to tefillah, so this was a good description of Klal Yisrael during the time of the Megillah. Our tefillahs were accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Ashi also doesn't explain his drasha, which is Oyanisa Elikim Lakachas Loi Goy Mikerev Goy V'Masas Baisus of Meisim V'Chavim Ben Chazakos V'Netuyev V'Meram Gedayim G'Hosem Le'Necha V'Mitzayim Le'Necha. This is referring to Hashem saving us through nisim and miracles, which is also a good description of Megillah Esther. Now, the Gemara interrupts this list of introductions with one drush. The Gemara says when it says Vayhi B'Mei Achashverosh, Rav said Vayhi is a combination of Vai and He, which means woe and mourning, two expressions of sadness. And that is the pasuk that refers to that as V'Smakartem Sham Le'Vecha Lavadim V'Lishvachas V'Ein Koneh. You will sell yourselves to your enemies as slaves, and no one will want to buy you. That is what happened during the Megillah, where they wanted to sell Klal Yisrael as slaves, but there was no one to buy them, even to buy them in order to kill them. As Esther said to Achashverosh, had we been sold as slaves, it would have been one thing, but we weren't. We were just designed to be killed here. The Gemara now continues with Shmuel's introduction. Even when their enemies land, I will not be revolted by them. I did not reject them, destroy them, or break my bris, my agreement with them, because I am Hashem, their God. So the Gemara explains this phrase by phrase. Two different versions of how to explain these phrases. Like Ma'astim, I have not been revolted by Klal Yisrael. That's in the time of the Greeks when I saved them. Like Altim, I didn't reject them. That's the times of Nebuchadnezzar. L'chalaisam, I didn't destroy them. Refers to the times of Haman. L'hafabrisi itam, to break my promise. That's in the time of the Persians. That is the rest of the Persians coming later. Kani Hashem Elokayim, I am Hashem. That refers to the future at the times of the war of Gog Magog. Now, second version of this is Lema Astim. That refers to the times of the Kastim, the Babylonians. Because then we had Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Lega Altim, I didn't reject them because that's in the times of the Greeks, the Yevanim, and there they had Shimon HaTzadik and the Chashmonaim and Matisyahu. L'chalaisam, I didn't destroy them. That's the time of Haman, where I gave them Mordechai and Esther to save them. L'hafabrisi itam, it's in the time of the later Persians when I had the house of Rebbe and all the Chachamim going on through the generations throughout the exile. That refers to the rest of the time of the exile through Rome and everything that followed afterwards. Kani Hashem Elokayim, I am Hashem there, a God. In the future, no one will be able to dominate or conquer Klal Yisrael. Okay, Levi's introduction. V'imlei Sayush as Yoshvei Haaretz. A pasuk in Bamidbar. Mipnechem v'haya asher teisiru mehem l'sikim be'einechem u'tzninim b'tzidechem v'nsaru eschem al aretz asher atem yeshem ba. Where Hashem tells Klal Yisrael, you better chase out the nations from Eretz Yisrael, otherwise they'll cause you problems. And this is exactly what happened when they failed to chase out Amalek, and they went to war against him, and they still survived, and that led us to the entire Purim potential tragedy before we were saved. Okay, the Gemara now goes back to discussing the Megillah. So, the Megillah says, V'hi b'mei Achashverosh. So, let's analyze the name Achashverosh. So, the Gemara says, Rav says, it's a contraction of Achiv Shel Rosh, brother of the head. He was the Ben Giloi of the head. He was the same character as the head. Who's the head? The head is Nebuchadnezzar. Like the pasuk says about Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel, Antu Reisha Di Dahava, you're the head of gold. That is the golden statue that he saw in his dream. The head of it, the head of the statue was made from gold. That refers to Nebuchadnezzar. So, Nebuchadnezzar is the head, and Achashverosh is Achav Sharosh. He's just like the head. He's similar to Nebuchadnezzar. Just like Nebuchadnezzar killed a lot, Achashverosh wanted to kill as many. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Achashverosh wanted to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. That is, he prevented it from being rebuilt. Like it says in Ezra, Machas Achashverosh b'tchilas Malchusa Kosvu Sitna al Yoshvi Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. In the beginning of the rule of Achashverosh, he stopped the building of Yehuda and Yerushalayim. Alright, now, more explanations of the name Achashverosh. Shmuel says it's a combination of Hushcharu and Eish. Hushcharu means blackened by fire. Klal Yisrael's faces became blackened by fire. became blackened just like by fire, just like the bottom of a pot becomes black by fire from the troubles that they had from Achashverosh. Rabbi Yochanan said Achashverosh is Och l'roishai. Everybody who thinks about Achashverosh says Och on his head, woe on his head because of all the problems that he gave everyone. Rabbi Chanina said it's Shekol Nasin Russian B'yamav. Everybody becomes poor because of all the taxes that he levied. Okay, next the Gemara says, let's analyze the Megillah further. It says Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. So we have the phrase hu Achashverosh. So whenever you have hu, that means that he stayed the same way he was from the beginning of the story to the end. And that as Achashverosh was a Rasha from the beginning to the end, even when he saves Klal Yisrael in the end, he was still a Rasha. Gemara shows a number of other people about who the word who appears to show that they stayed the same. Who Esav was as Rasha, as big a Rasha's entire life. Who Dasan va'aviram, they expressed the same wickedness their entire career in the Torah. Who Hamelach Achaz, King Achaz was a Rasha from beginning to end. Avram who Avraham. Avram was a tzaddik from beginning to end. Who Aaron and Moshe, they were tzaddikim from beginning to end. V'David who Akatan, David, he was the youngest, that's the smallest, that he was humble from beginning to end, just as when he was the youngest child in his family and he was learning from Mephibosheth, he was humble then. Later in his, as when he was king and he learned from Achitophel, he was still humble and he called Achitophel Alufi Miyudoi, my chief and my teacher, just because he taught him two things. Okay, going further in the Megillah, it says Hamelech. Achashverosh ruled. The Gemara says Hamelech means he took the rulership on his own. He was not the next in line for the throne. He went and he took hold of it on his own. How did he do that? So the Gemara says either it's a praise for him because he was the only one who was fitting for the job, or it's a disparagement of him that he was very much unfitting for the job and he went and he bribed his way into the rulership position. Okay, next it says that he ruled from Haidu to Kush. So what's Haidu and Kush? So it's a Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. The Mefarshim explain they both agree that Haidu and Kush are near each other, and they both agree that this is telling you that Achashverosh ruled the entire world with ease. But how do you understand it? So one says that just like Haidu and Kush are near each other and you could rule from one to the other easily, it's saying he ruled over all 127 countries under his domain easily. The other is that Haidu and Kush are near each other, but if you go the long way around the world, they are on opposite ends, and therefore he ruled over the entire world from Haidu to Kush. Now it says the Gemara, you find a very similar expression about King Shlomo. It says that he ruled all over this side of the river, mitifsach at Aza, from Tifsach to Aza. You have the same thing, where they near each other or where the opposite ends of the world. If they're near each other, he ruled over everything with ease, and if they're opposite ends of the world, then he ruled over the entire world. Okay, next, the Megillah says he ruled over Sheva Esem Umeya Medina, 127 countries. The Gemara says a drasha on the number. The Gemara says first he had 100, then first he had 7, then he had 20, then he had 100. The Gemara says, but if that's how you're going to understand that number, so then when it says that Amram lived 137 years, how are you going to explain that? It doesn't work like that. First he lived 7, then he lived 30, then he lived 100. It doesn't make sense. The Gemara says no, because here it's extra. It doesn't have to say from Haidu to Kush and 127. Both are included. Each one means the entire world. Why is it repeated extra? So it's a drasha to tell you that he went up in levels like this, 7 to 20 to 100. Okay, now the Gemara says a brisa. 3 people ruled over the entire universe, and they are Achav, Achashverosh, and Nebuchadnezzar. Where do you see that? So Gemara is going to show the source that they 3 ruled, and Gemara will show the sources that others ruled over the entire world, and want to know why they're left out of the brisa. So, first of all, Achav, where do we see that he ruled over the entire world? Because when Ovadia met Eliyahu, he said that Achav has been searching for you in every kingdom, and he made every kingdom swear that you're not in their country. Now the pasuk is if there's any country that they didn't send people to look for you, and they said you're not there, and he made them swear that you are not to be found in his land. So how did Achav make every country swear unless he ruled over every country? So you see, he ruled over every country. Now he didn't let Nebuchadnezzar ruled over every country. That's because Hashem promised through a nevuah of Yirmiyahu that he would. Like it says, B'cher v'vara, like it says, V'hoya hagay ha'mamacha asher lo yitin es tzavara ba'ol melech Bavel, B'cher v'vara v'davar efkad al gayahu no Hashem atumi oise biyadai. Every country will have to place its neck under the rule of Bavel, and therefore Nebuchadnezzar, king of Bavel, ruled over the entire world. Now, how do you know Achashverosh ruled over the entire world? Like we said, 127 countries. Haidu to Kush, like we said up to now. And now the Gemara has questions. There are 4 others that seems to say that they ruled over the whole over the entire world. Why are they not on the list? So Gemara gives a Simin Shas Dach Shin Samach Daled Chaf Shloimei Sancherev Daryavish and Koresh. So Gemara asked about each of them. First of all, Shloimei, he ruled over the entire world that we know. Why is he not on the list? Of course, that's because he spent time as a commoner. He was thrown out of his reign by the head of the Shadim, by Ashmedai, and therefore he was not a king fully, and he can't be on the list. Says Gemara, but this machlokes whether or not he went back to full authority. According to the one that says he went back to full authority, why don't you say that he should be on the list? So Gemara says, okay, you're right, but according to that opinion, he went back to full authority. He's too high to be on the list. This list is only people who rule over all human beings on the planet. Shlomo ruled over the Shadim as well. Like it says, Vayeshev Shlomo Akisi Hashem, he sat on the throne of Hashem, that is, he was ruling as if it were from Shemayim over the Shadim that are on a higher level, higher in the air and the sky than humankind, and therefore he can't be on this list. Then the rest says, well, what about Sancherev? Sancherev ruled over the entire world, like he said, which God saved their land from my hand. Versus in the world, no, Sancherev never conquered Yerushalayim, and that's significant enough to mean that he can't be on the list. So it says, okay, what about Daryavish? Daryavish wrote, like it says, a pasuk in Daniel, Daryavish Malkik Sav L'chol Amamaya Umaya Ulushnaya Di Diorin B'chol Arash Shlomcha Yiskei. He sent a letter to all the nations of the world telling them about the miracle that happened with Daniel and the lions. So if he sent a letter to all of them, obviously he ruled over all of them. So the Gemara says no, he didn't. He only ruled over 120, as it says clearly. Shvakadam Daryavish V'Hekem Al Mechusa Lachas Darpnaya Mava Esrin. He pointed over his kingdom, which was 120 governors. So obviously he only ruled over 120 countries, not 127. Now this Daryavish refers to Daryavish Hamadi, who was right before Achashverosh. So Achashverosh got another 7 later. So Gemara says, so then why did he send messages to all 127 countries? The Mefarshim ask, why did he send to all 127? So they answer and explain that he sent to 120, which he ruled over, and 7 more just to inform them about the great miracle that happened. Next, we want to ask, what about Koresh? Koresh ruled over the entire world, like he said, Kayamar Koresh Melech Baras Kol Mamchos Arz Nasan Li Hashem. So says Koresh, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth, God has given to me. Somebody says that was Koresh just showing off, but it wasn't necessarily true, and therefore you cannot depend on it for facts, and he did not really rule over the entire world. Okay, the Gemara goes further in the actual Megillah. So it says, then when the king sat on his throne, meaning when he began to rule, but afterwards it says, in the 3rd year of his reign. So which is it? In the beginning of his reign, or the 3rd year of his reign? So where it says, Kisheves means when he became calm, when he relaxed. That's because he decided that Klal Yisrael weren't going to be saved from under his hand, because the 70 years that were predicted, how long the exile would be, had ended. Now, the Gemara says, Belshazzar had made the same calculation, and Achashverosh said Belshazzar messed up. He made a mistake in his calculation, but I got it right, and therefore I am comfortable, and I know that Klal Yisrael aren't going to be saved, and that's when he made his feast. That's when he made the great party with the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what happened with Belshazzar? So, the pasuk that says all this is a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyah, where it says, Ki lefi malayis leBavel shivim shana efkadeschem. When 7 years are completed for Bavel, that's when I'm going to save you. So it's 70 years of Bavel. So Belshazzar said, okay, 70 years from when Bavel began. When did the kingdom of Bavel begin? When Nebuchadnezzar kicked out Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, and he took over the entire area. So Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 45 years. His son Evel Merodach ruled for 23 years. That's a total of 68 years. So in the 2nd year of Belshazzar's reign, he was the son of Evel Merodach. It was a complete 7 years. He made a party, took out the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, because he knew that the 7 years had gone by and Klal Yisrael had not been saved. So now the Gemara says, let's hold a second. Let's go into this slowly over here. First of all, how do you know that Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 19 years, for a total of 45 years? So the Gemara says the Psukim discussing what happened with Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of Malchus Yehuda and the Beis HaMikdash. So it works as follows. Nebuchadnezzar kicked out Ashur. In his second year, he conquered Yehoiakim, king of Yehuda. 7 years later, after that, he sent Yehoiakim's son, Yehoiachin, into exile. That was Golas HaChayish Ramazgar, where he sent 10,000 Talmidei Chachamim into exile into Bavel. Now, 11 years after that, his armies came back and destroyed the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim. So he took over. In his second year, he conquered Yehoiakim. In his 8th year, he sent Golas HaChayish Hamazger, and in his 19th year, 11 years later, he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Now, the Gemara asks that there are psukim that discuss the Golas Yehoiachin. One says it was in the 7th year, and one says it's in the 8th year. So which is it? So the Gemara says it's in the 7th year, since he conquered Yehoiakim, but it's the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's Malchus, because he conquered Yehoiakim in his own second year. Now, the final exile and destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we have one on pasuk that says it was in the 18th, and one says in the 19th. Again, same thing. 18 years since he conquered Yehoiakim, 19 years since he took over and became Melech altogether. And when he first conquered Ashur and its capital city of Nineveh, which the Gemara discusses. Now, that tells us a lot of history, that it was in his 19th year when he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara now brings another pasuk to show that he ruled for 45 years. This one says as follows: 37 years after the Golus of Yehoiachin, Melech Yehuda. Remember, Golus Yehoiachin happened in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. This was Mishnei Mas Chodesh, 12th month, Be'esem Chamish Chodesh, 25th of the month. Nasa Evel Merudach Melech Bavel, that Evel Merudach, son of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Bavel, lifted up the head of Yehoiachin, and they took him out of prison. So it says Bishnas Malchuze. It says it was in the first year where Evel Merudach was a king. So you see that Nebuchadnezzar had up until the year previous to that. So it was 37 years after Golus Yehoiachin. So that was in his 8th year. So 37 plus 8 takes us to 45. He ruled for 45 years, and that's how we know how long he was the king. Now, how do you know that Evel Merudach himself ruled for 23 years? Gemara says that's a Gemara that we know from Masorah. And in Belshazzar's second year, Belshazzar himself ruled for 3 years. In his second year, he calculated that that was already 68 years is when he took the throne, and in his second year, the 7 years were up. He took out the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, and he made a big party. And like the pasuk says, Daniel said to Belshazzar, above the master of the heavens you raised yourself up, and the Kelim of his Beis HaMikdash you brought before you. Now that party was at the end of his 3rd year, and that was the night that he was killed by Daryavish Hamodi, who took over that night, and that was the night of the handwriting at the wall. And like the pasuk says, Daryavish took over when he was 62 years old. Now, that was Belshazzar's calculation. Achashverosh said he made a mistake. How did Achashverosh understand Belshazzar's mistake? So he said Belshazzar counted from when Bavel began. His problem, says Achashverosh, was that he read the pasuk wrong. The pasuk doesn't say that it was 70 years from Malchus Bavel. It says 70 years from Bavel. It refers to Golus Bavel. So it should be 70 years from Golus Yechania, not from when Nebuchadnezzar became the king. Now, Golus Yechania was in the 8th year of the Babylonian Empire. So you have to add 8 years to the calculation. So 8 years later, so he calculated 1 additional year of Belshazzar, 5 years of Daryavish and Koresh, and then 2 years of his own Malchus, and after 2 years of his own rulership, Achashverosh said, alright, the 70 years are now up, and I did not make a mistake, and therefore I know that it's time for me to make a party. Now, what actually happened? Belshazzar was punished because he was killed at his party. Achashverosh was punished because Vashti was killed at his party. The Gemara describes it as the Satan came and danced at the party. So Gemara asks, but what's wrong with Achashverosh's calculation? What was it supposed to be? Gemara says it wasn't 70 years from Galus Yichanya, it was 70 years from the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which was 11 years later, when Tzidkiyahu was sent out and the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So Gemara says, so that means he's supposed to be adding 11 years to the Malchus. Adding 11 years to the Malchus, that means that it should end up in Achashverosh's 13th year. So then the Churban the Kaisel should have been redeemed then. But the Beis HaMikdash did not start being rebuilt until the second year afterwards. So there's 2 years off. According to what the right number is, we weren't saved until year 72, not year 70. So the Gemara answers that Rava says is that you can't just add up all the years of the kings, because sometimes a king will count half a year. So if you have a change of a kingship in the middle, so only 1 year went by, but it'll count as 1 year as the last year of the first king, and the first year of the latter king, you'll count as 2 years, and therefore you have an extra 2 years. And that's why it sounds like 72 years, but it was really only 70 years. Now this happened with Belshazzar being taken over by Daryavish Hamadi. The Gemara has a brisa which says that specifically. And it also happened between Nebuchadnezzar and Evel Merodach.